Hello, friends. I want to talk today about something tender, practical, uncomfortable, and deeply human, something that affects every human on the planet. I call it the quiet business of goodbye. And I know that that phrase might sound a little strange at first because when we talk about death, we usually talk about the emotional part, the grief, the loss, the memories, the shock, your loved one's empty chair, the phone call that changes everything, the way that your body knows something has happened before your mind can even make sense of it. But there is another part of death that most people aren't prepared for, and that is the paperwork, the passwords, the bills, the bank accounts, the phone calls, the legal documents, the medical decisions, the funeral arrangements, the utilities, the debts, the subscriptions, the accounts no one knew existed. The business of a life that does not simply stop just because the person who lived that life is gone. And I do wish that we talked about this more um, in a loving way, in a grown-up way, um, because I have now seen this from more angles than I ever wanted to. I first wrote about this topic back in December last year. I was writing from a place of grief of from losing my mom and several other close family members and friends in a very short period of time. And at that point, um, I had already been thrown into the business side of death in a way that I was not prepared for. And now, since then, I've lost three more family members, two of them just in this past week. So, this conversation feels really prevalent and relevant in my life right now. And it also feels different now because I am on the other side of the immediate shock from my mom's passing. So, um, yeah, things feel clearer. So recently, last week, a few days before my cousin passed, I was sitting in hospice with her, and as I sat there, I watched her best friend, kind of like it's almost like a reflection of what I was going through when my mom passed. But I watched her best friend moving through the room with so much love and so much care and so much responsibility on her shoulders. She was not only my cousin's best friend, she was also her medical power of attorney, and she was the person making decisions. And she was the person trying to manage the logistics and, handle so much of the business side of death while also being in her own grief process, while also working a full-time job, and while also trying to keep up with the ordinary demands of her own life. And so I just sat there witnessing her. Um, and I was thinking, we don't talk about this. This is the part of life that no one really prepares you for, because when someone is dying, or when someone has just died, you don't you don't suddenly become a perfectly organized, emotionally regulated, spreadsheet loving version of yourself. You're grieving, you're tired, you're overwhelmed, you're in shock. You're trying to remember what day it is. You're eating weird meals at weird times. You're answering texts and phone calls. Oh my God, so many phone calls. You're calling the relatives and the friends. You're trying to be present in the sacredness of goodbye while also being asked to remember passwords and locate insurance policies and call banks and make decisions, sign forms, and just in general figure out what the hell happens next. And that's an enormous amount of invisible labor. When my mom died, I was thrown into this role, so much of this as well. My mom handled everything. She handled the bills, the banking, the systems, the organization. She was not all that organized, truth be told. Um, she handled the household details, the things that just somehow got done because she was the one doing them, and I don't think it was until she was gone suddenly that my dad realized that he really had no roadmap. He didn't have a list. He didn't have clean and clear access into accounts that he was a co-owner on. He didn't even have a full understanding of which accounts existed, or what needed to be paid, or what was set up on auto pay, what wasn't, what was in whose name, or where everything was housed. So while I was grieving my mom, I also became part detective, part administrator, part bookkeeper and forensics accountant, um, part translator, emotional support human, crisis manager, and we're still dealing with pieces of all this. My mom died in October, and we're still figuring things out. There are still accounts and still some debts, and there's still questions and things that pop up out of nowhere, and make you think, okay, wait, how are we even still dealing with all of this? And now I'm sitting in meetings with estate attorneys with my dad, and we're talking through things that are necessary, um, but also very confronting, because these conversations require you to look directly at the fact that life changes, bodies age, people die, and somebody has to know what to do when they do. And I think part of why this is so hard is because two of the most taboo topics in our society are money and death. We are so weird about both of them. We whisper about money, or we don't talk about it at all because of shame or embarrassment or whatever has been ingrained in us since we were kids. And we avoid death. We act like talking about either one of these things is rude or dark or inappropriate, greedy, depressing, or somehow inviting something bad to happen. But we are living human lives in human bodies in a 3D physical world, and that physical world includes money. It includes rent and mortgages, um, medical bills, insurance, bank accounts, funeral homes, attorneys, cremation or burial costs, travel, time off work. It includes the cost of taking care of a body after a soul has left it. And pretending that money is not part of death does not make somebody more spiritual. It makes you less prepared. And, I am a spiritual person. I know that the soul moves on to something not quite so hard, to something beautiful, to something where all of the layers are kind of stripped away and we finally understand things that we maybe didn't understand here in the 3D on Earth. You know, I believe in signs. I believe in the continuation of love and energy beyond the body, and that there is more to this life than what we can see and touch and put in a spreadsheet. But I also know that we live here in a 3D life, and our 3D life does have logistics. Sorry. Sorry for the bad news. We've got paperwork, we've got bank accounts and passwords and legal systems and due dates, and you know, this life has people left behind when you go who are trying to grieve while also trying to figure out, how to keep the lights on and close the accounts and honor the wishes of the deceased and make the decisions. So to me, this is not a morbid conversation. It's stewardship. This is love, just in practical form. This is what it looks like to say, I love you enough not to leave you with a mess. You know, so I'm not just talking about, what our loved ones left behind for us. I'm talking about what we can leave behind for our loved ones. And hopefully that's not a mess to deal with. So, none of us will do this perfectly. So this is not a conversation to have, to become something that, just another thing that people feel guilty about. Most families have some level of disorganization around this because most families have been taught not to talk about it. We celebrate beginnings so easily. We've got the baby showers and the birth announcements and the first birthday and the weddings and the graduations, the new house, the new business, the new chapter. And all of those things deserve to be talked about and celebrated. But endings are sacred too. Goodbyes are sacred. Death is a huge part of the human story, and if we can learn to talk about birth plans and wedding budgets and college funds, business launches, retirement goals, vacation itineraries, then we can also learn to talk about end of life wishes, funeral preferences, bank accounts, powers of attorney, and who knows where the damn passwords are. These things need to become table topics, dinner table topics, family meeting topics, private conversation topics between partners, Sunday afternoon topics between adult children and aging parents. And it's not because we're trying to rush death and not because you're being negative, but because silence makes everything harder later. So today I want to offer some direction. And I have to say that this is not legal advice or financial advice. It's just advice for me, someone who has lived enough of this now to know that preparation truly is mercy for the loved ones that you're going to be leaving behind. And I want to walk you through some of the things that can make the business of goodbye easier for the people that you love. So the first thing, I think I have 8 total. The first is to have the legal documents. So at a minimum, this usually means having a will. For some people, it may mean having a trust. It may mean a durable power of attorney. It may mean a medical power of attorney. It may mean an advance directive or living will. The exact documents that you'll need will depend on the state that you live in, your family, your assets, your wishes, and your situation. So please talk to an estate attorney if you can. And if that is not an affordable, or if that is not an option for you financially speaking, then darling, Google it. There's tons of lists and things like that online. Do your research now. You can totally DIY this. It is, of course, pretty solid on a legal front to have an estate attorney, but if that's just not an option for you, then have something in writing. That's the larger point. Put your wishes in writing, because when your wishes are not in writing, then your people are left guessing. And grief is already hard enough without making people also have to guess. A will or trust it's not just about who gets what. It's about reducing confusion. It's about minimizing conflict. And I know that we have all seen conflict arise when people die, siblings coming out of the woodworks after being estranged for years and years, etc. So, this is about making sure that the people you trust are legally able to do what needs to be done. Let's say that you've been in a partnership for 30 years or something, but you never got legally married. then your partner has no rights, you know? So a medical power of attorney is important because if you are alive but unable to make decisions for yourself, someone may need to speak on your behalf. A financial power of attorney matters because someone may need access, well, they will need access to your accounts and, you know, to pay bills or manage the practical things if you can't. Um, so I also want to point out that these things are not just documents for elderly people. Why? Because life is fragile for all of us. We have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow or what's going to happen the next time we walk out the front door, you know? And so this is not a conversation that I want to be fear-based. It's truth-based. And truth is loving when we let it be loving. So that's the first thing. Have it written down. The second thing is to create a master list of your financial life. So this does not have to be fancy. It can be a secure spreadsheet, it can be a document and a password protected folder. It can be something printed and stored safely somewhere. It can be whatever system you will actually keep updated. But someone needs to know what exists, okay? Like they need to know your bank account, like what bank do you bank with? What credit cards do you have? Do you have any loans? Is the mortgage paid off? Is there a car note? Do you have student loans? Is there medical debt? Are there investment accounts or retirement accounts, life insurance, health insurance, utilities, the phone bill, internet, streaming services, business accounts, payment processors, subscriptions? Do you have a storage unit? Is there a safe deposit box at a bank somewhere? Anything that has money going in or out. Because one of the most stressful things after someone dies is not knowing what you don't know, and then you get these phone calls months after, and you're like, I didn't even know that account existed, but it's been 5 months and they want their money. So, if you don't know which accounts exist or what's on auto pay or what bills are due when or what debts are legitimate, and let me just warn you, especially for the elderly who may not be quite as savvy on the current scams of today. When someone dies, you're going to have some scammers reach out to you because those things are like public record, and um, there are people, unfortunately, who are searching widows and widowers out to scam them out of money that they say are, like illegitimate debts and things like that. Um, and when you're in grief, you're out of it. So it's easy to fall for that kind of stuff because scam artists it's all psychology. They go for the urgency and the fear factor. So be careful there, but you need to know what needs to be canceled. And if you don't know who to call, then every unknown becomes another little wave in an already overwhelming ocean, right? So your master list, it doesn't have to include every password. In fact, I would not recommend just listing passwords in a random document, but it should say, okay, here are the institutions, here are the accounts, here's what exists, here's where to start. Okay. The third thing is to have a secure password plan because in modern life, so much of our existence lives behind logins. We have our banking apps, our email, cloud storage, phone accounts, social media, business software, insurance portals, medical portals, utilities, payment apps. And if no one can get in, then everything becomes harder. So I don't mean to say to hand your passwords to everybody. Don't do that. I just mean that using a secure password manager or vault and making sure one deeply trusted person knows how to access it if something happens to you, that's what I want you to do. And think about your phone too, because so many accounts require two-factor authentication now. So you can have the login, like the credentials, the username, the password, but if the code goes to a phone that no one can unlock, then you're probably still going to be stuck. So, these are the kinds of things to think through ahead of time. Who needs to access your phone if needed? Luckily for me, my mom because she was using the fingerprint thing. This is her phone right here. She was using the fingerprint thing on her phone for herself, but luckily when she was in the hospital, she remembered the password too. So I got the password before she passed away, which made it still was not easy, but it made it so much easier to, be able to get the authentication codes, to be able to check her email that I didn't know the password to. The phone is like a huge, this is like so important. Please make sure someone can get into your phone. Okay. Make sure somebody knows where the password manager is. Like, who knows the master password or emergency access process? Like, where is the recovery information? I know all of this sounds tedious. I know, and it is tedious, but taking care of the tedious things now can prevent so much chaos later. Trust me. Um, okay, the fourth thing is to write down your final wishes. And I'm not just talking about like the formal legal versions. Like, yeah, obviously that stuff matters. We've already kind of talked about it, but I'm talking about like, what is your soul? What do you want? What do you want to happen? Do you want to be buried or cremated? Do you have a cemetery plot? Do you want a funeral, a memorial, a celebration of life, something private, something religious, something spiritual, something simple? Are there songs that you want played? Are there songs that you absolutely do not want played? Do you care what happens to your ashes? Do you want people to gather, or do you want people to tell stories about you? Do you want them to wear black, or do you want everybody in purple or in gold, because that feels more like you? So I know this might sound ridiculous to be asking yourself these kinds of questions, because you might be thinking like, oh, it really doesn't matter. I'm gone. Like, what do I care? But sometimes it's not for you. It's for the people that you're leaving behind. Because when someone is grieving, having to answer these questions, while to you right now that they might seem like small or, insignificant, to the person grieving, they're not small. When you are grieving, every decision feels heavier, when your heart is broken. And sometimes the greatest gift to the grieving person is to be able to say, well, this is what she wanted, or, this is what he asked for. Instead of having to make every decision from scratch when your cognitive fuel has already been eaten up by the grief and all of the other to-dos. Okay. So the fifth thing is to set aside money, or at least make a plan for your final expenses. So this is where the money taboo gets very, very, very real. Why? Because funerals cost money. Cremations cost money. Death certificates cost money. Um, Everything costs money. Attorneys, travel, like, people have to travel to get to you. Taking time off work costs money. Cleaning out a house costs money. Keeping bills paid while an estate is being handled, that costs money. And look, these costs arrive fast, overnight. The expenses don't wait until everybody in the family has emotionally processed what happened. It doesn't the expenses don't wait for you to stop crying. They don't wait until people are ready. So having a dedicated savings, life insurance, a payable on death account, or some kind of clear financial plan for final expenses can be an incredible act of care for the people that you're leaving behind. And I know that not everyone has extra money just sitting around. So I don't want anyone to feel shame in me saying this, because I know, and I'm not going to pretend that everybody can easily fund everything. This is more about having the conversation. So, what exists, what doesn't, what would need to be paid for, who would be responsible? Is there a life insurance? Where is that policy? Who's the beneficiary? Are the accounts titled correctly? Because sometimes the problem is that is not that there was no money. Sometimes it's that no one knew where it was or how to access it or whether it existed at all. So the conversation is very important. Someone needs to know. Okay. The sixth thing is to make sure your beneficiaries are updated. Oh my gosh. This one's big. It's one of those little details that can create a lot of pain if it's wrong. Okay. Bank accounts, retirement accounts, life insurance policies, um, investment accounts, and sometimes even vehicles or other assets. Those can have beneficiary designations or transfer on death instructions. And those designations often override what people assume will happen. So if you got divorced, remarried, had a child, lost a spouse, changed your mind, uh, became estranged from someone, or simply haven't looked at your paperwork in 10 years, it may be time to review it. Um, so, because the wrong beneficiary can create heartbreak and conflict and delays or outcomes that you never would have chosen. Okay. Okay. The seventh thing is to think about your digital life. So this is newer territory for a lot of families. And it's important because we are living the digital life now, my friends. What happens to your social media accounts? Your email, your photos, your cloud storage, your website, your business platforms, your online courses, your intellectual property, your writing, your client files, your domain name, your payment processors, your YouTube channel. Your digital legacy is part of your legacy, right? And for business owners especially, this can get complicated really fast. If you are a solopreneur, a creator, a consultant, a coach, a healer, a bookkeeper, an artist, a writer, or anyone running a business that lives largely online, then someone needs to know how to get into the digital doors. They don't need access to everything right now, but they do need to know what exists and what should be preserved and what should be closed and who should be contacted. This is especially important if clients, payments, contracts, or private information are involved. Think about it if you have clients on autopay. Someone needs to be able to get into your accounting software, your invoicing software, and stop that. Okay. Um, the eighth thing is to talk about it before there is a crisis. And this might be, I think this is the most important one. I begged my parents for probably 20 years before my mom died for us to have this conversation, and we never did. It kept getting put off. So please talk about it. Don't make it a secret. And please don't make your people that you leave behind become detectives while they're grieving. Tell someone where the documents are. Tell them who your attorney is, which bank you use, all of these things that we have talked about already. Tell them what you would want medically, and what you want after death. You have to tell them what matters to you. And I know that these conversations can feel awkward at first. Most of us weren't raised to speak openly about death and money. In many families, these topics were treated like locked doors. You don't ask about money, you don't talk about death, you don't bring up wills because someone might think you're being greedy. You don't ask your parents about accounts because they might think you're waiting for them to die. You don't tell your children what you want because you don't want to upset them. So then everyone stays silent. And then something happens, and that silence then becomes a burden. And I want us to change that. I want these conversations to become normalized. I want us to be able to say, hey, I love you. And because I love you, we need to talk about what happens if something happens. I want adult children to be able to ask their parents, do you have your documents in place, without feeling like vultures. I want parents to be able to say, here's where everything is, without feeling like they are inviting death closer. I want partners to know each other's financial lives. You know, I want single people to choose trusted people and business owners to have continuity plans. I want families to stop confusing secrecy with protection, because um, secrecy does not protect people from grief. Clarity helps protect people from chaos. I mean, grief is unavoidable, but chaos can often be reduced, right? And that is the point of this conversation. We cannot love people enough to keep them from losing us one day. And we can't organize our lives so perfectly that no one will hurt when we're gone. But we can make sure that they're not also drowning in preventable confusion. We can leave them breadcrumbs. We can leave instructions. We can leave clues. We can leave access. We can leave names and numbers and documents. We can leave enough clarity that the people we love can grieve us instead of having to hunt through drawers and guess at passwords and argue over wishes, um, or sit on hold with institutions while their nervous system is already shattered. Um, and I want to say something else gently here, especially to the people who are the organizers and their families. If you are the person who handles everything, then everyone else may be more dependent on you than you or they realize. They may not know what you know. They may not know what's due, where it's paid from, which accounts exist, who to call, what the passwords are, what happens if you're not there to explain it. Um, when one person holds all the systems, they become invisible. So if you are that person, the most loving thing you can do is document your system. You don't have to expect to die tomorrow. But you would do this because you love the people who would be lost without you, who are going to be lost in an emotional sense without you. Okay. And if you are not the person who handles everything, then please let this be your invitation to learn. Ask questions. Sit down with your spouse, your parent, your sibling, your adult child, your trusted friend, whoever is appropriate in your life. Ask, where would I start if something happened? And that question alone can open the door. Where would I start? Where are the documents? Who's the attorney? What bank do you use? Is there life insurance? Who has medical power of attorney? What would you want if you could not speak for yourself? What should I know? So, it is a tough conversation, but this conversation doesn't have to happen all at once. You don't have to have like the whole conversation at once. You can start with just one conversation, one document, one list, one password plan, one attorney appointment, one beneficiary review, one folder labeled start here, that alone would be a gift. And if the conversation brings up emotion, then let it. Of course, it's going to bring up emotion. We're talking about love. We're talking about loss. We're talking about mortality and about the people who matter most to us. You know, the conversation is sacred. I would give anything to sit across from my mom and ask her some of these questions now. I've had to figure out a lot on my own. But I would give anything to have been able to make the list with her, to understand her system and to hear her wishes in her own words. I did get some of that when she was in the hospital, but by that point, I was already in super stress dysregulated nervous system, fear, worry, panic mode, you know? So, had we been able to discuss this when we weren't at that crisis point, had I been able to hear her wishes in her own words before we reached that level, it would have eased everything that followed. Obviously I can't go back and do that. So I am talking about it now for my family, for my clients, for my community, for the people who are going to lose someone and have no idea what is about to be asked of them. And that's probably you. We all lose people. So, for the people who are going to be named power of attorney and suddenly realize that love also comes with logistics, for the people who are already grieving and also trying to find the damn bank statement, for the people who keep saying, I know that we need to talk about this, but keep putting it off because it feels too heavy. This is for you, and I get it. It is heavy, but carrying the conversation now is lighter than carrying the confusion later. So please let this be the nudge. Not from fear, but from love. Make that list, have the conversation, review the beneficiaries, write down the wishes, create the folder, find the attorney. Tell someone where that folder is. Make money and death table topics, dinner table topics, because your life deserves to be honored with clarity. And the people who love you deserve the mercy of knowing what to do when goodbye comes. That is the quiet business of goodbye. That's what it is. And it may be one of the most loving kinds of business we ever do. I hope this is helpful and that you have a beautiful day. Let me know if you have any questions. Bye.